is a great order and a meaningful development of things. For instance, take the very simple, I'll give you 2-3 examples. One, the earth is going round the sun, and it's going around exactly in 365 days plus something, small thing which goes on adding. And every leap year we add that up to a 1 day more. Okay. So it is turning also around itself, and that also has got a meaning because it produces seasons and it produces so many different things. So this is there seems to be an order, there seems to be someone guiding from behind and telling you what is there and what is not there. There's no chaos in the universe. Okay. Then the other thing is, when you come to the life, okay, animals behave as though they are conscious. When it is cold, they migrate to cooler climates. They may migrate, but how is it they don't migrate to other places where it is even colder by mistake? So these things are there everywhere. Even in plants, we see that there is a consciousness somewhere. So, but we also see that there is a mechanical force. There are laws that operate. Now, this you have to understand. Laws and consciousness seem to be at loggerheads. One, when you are conscious, you have the freedom to do what you want. So consciousness is equal to freedom. Okay. But laws means you have to follow the laws and there is no freedom. So you see both these things in the universe and you wonder what the hell is going on. Which is the right one and from where is it coming? This is what Swami is saying, that we don't really understand what is happening. Look at the human body, the way it works as an absolutely fantastic machine. Who has created this machine? Where is the creator? I don't see the creator. I only see the result. Okay, it's like an exhibition hall of paintings. You go into the painting hall and you see the paintings and you say, "My God, what beautiful paintings! Who is the painter?" But the painter is not there. You don't see the painter. Exactly in the same way, those who have a little curiosity and they look at the universe and see how fantastic it is. Who is the creator? So you don't know itself. So what is the explanation? Is there a law that is doing all this, or is there a consciousness? Okay, so this is what he said in the previous para. I'm just telling you in very short. There seems to be fixity, law, determination, but also variability, freedom, choice. Both seem to exist side by side. Free will and fixed fate both move together. What is this power of creation? It seems to be a conscious entity enjoying its own creations. But where is it? We see no sign of it. Okay? This is what he has said in the previous paragraph. Now he is trying to give an explanation. He'll look at all the explanations. A first possible explanation points to a self-organizing dynamic chance that is at work. Chance with a C cap. In other words, freedom. There is no law. There is just it is going either this way or that way. This is a theory that many scientists also hold. Okay. The other day I was watching a video where an Indian scientist, he's from India, he's saying there is no purpose. Everything is a chance. Okay. He is a scientist, all right, but he is a pakka materialist. So a first possible explanation points to a self-organizing dynamic chance that is at work. Now note, self-organizing necessarily means consciousness. Can you organize yourself without consciousness? Not possible. So, chance. I don't have any purpose, but I am conscious and I go this way and I go that way. So this is a consciousness which is there, okay? A chance. A paradox necessitated by the appearance of inevitable order on one side, of unaccountable freak and fantasy on the other side of the cosmic phenomenon we call nature. So both the things seem to be there. If you see the birth of any one species, okay, a cat will always produce a cat only. He's not going to produce a dog. In other words, there is a law that is operating. So the law is definitely there, okay. Inevitable order, he is using the word. But on the other hand, the cats that it is producing so many different types. One white, one black, one with spots, one with black spots, one with brown spots. There's no end to it. Okay, sepia spots. So there is a chance as well as a law. So this is what it's a paradox. They are opposites. A paradox necessitated by the appearance of inevitable order on one side. There is order. The sun, the earth is not going around the sun haphazardly and doing whatever it wants, although there is freedom. But it is doing absolutely in order, inevitable order on one side, of unaccountable freak and fantasy on the other side of the cosmic phenomenon we call nature. And everywhere you see this, okay? A mango tree is going to produce only mangoes. It will never produce chiku trees unless man interferes with the genetic code. So it is going on, but it produces infinite types of mangoes. That's the whole thing. Okay, so an inconscient and inconsequent force. Inconsequent. Okay, an inconscient and inconsequent force. Inconscient means no consciousness, and inconsequent, without any order, without anything. Okay, no consequence. The consequences can go on changing. There is no fixed consequence. There is no fixed result. We may say that acts at random and creates this or that by general chance without any determining principle. Okay, the cat that is producing different kittens, there doesn't seem to be any, I can't foretell what the kittens are going to be of what color. I can't say. It's impossible to foretell without any determining principle. Determinations coming in only as a result of a persistent repetition of the same rhythm of action and succeeding because only this repetitive rhythm could succeed in keeping things in being. The repetitive rhythm he is talking of, cats producing only cats, dogs producing only dogs, mango trees producing only mango trees, nothing else. So there is a same rhythm of action. That same rhythm of action makes you feel that there is a law that operates. If that was not there, there would be no law. Okay, so repetitive rhythm. It's a rhythm that goes on repeating itself. But this implies that somewhere in the origin of things, there's a boundless possibility with a P cap. Okay, P cap. That means chance. There's a possibility of a womb of innumerable possibilities that are manifested out of it by the original energy, E cap. There is an energy which we see in the physical world. All the energies that we see in the physical world have got characteristics. Okay, the thermonuclear energy, heat energy, mechanical energy, electrical energy, okay, lightning energy, storms, all we can describe in some way or other. But there is something which is common to all this, which is the abstract energy. That's why he is using the E cap. You can't describe it. It's an energy which you can never really say what it is. When I said that you can describe the different energies, it's relative. Because we can make a distinction between muscular energy and electrical energy and chemical energy, we can distinguish. But we ask the scientist, what is electricity? He will not be able to say. So there is both. There is the unknown element and yet there is some known element also. Okay, so by the original energy, an incalculable, inconscient, which we find some embarrassment in calling either an existence or a non-existence. We come back to the idea of the self, the pradhana of the Sankhya, that which is an existence or a non-existence. Is it a substance which is without features or is it something really totally nothing at all in it? Okay, this is the thing which you can't describe. That's why there is a confusion between Buddhism and Advaita. Buddhism says it's a nil, it is zero, there is nothing in it. And Advaita is saying that which seems to be zero and nothing in it is full of energy and full of possibilities. Okay, incalculable, inconscient, and with infinite number of possibilities in it. Okay, so the word embarrassment is clear because barren emptiness, or is it featureless fullness? You can see it in both ways. If it is barren emptiness, you are a Buddhist, the origin of things, okay? And if it's a featureless fullness, without features, but it is full. Okay. So this is what the problem is. You don't know what to call it. Okay. So in calling either an existence or a non-existence. So when he is using the word existence with an E cap, he means subtle substance, the subtlest substance without features. Okay. And non-existence, not even features. There are no features in it at all, but it is not even substance. It is nothing. It's a zero. For without some such origin and basis, the appearance and action of the energy is unintelligible. However much you see that there is a force which is following a law, a mechanical law, yet you do see that there is consciousness somewhere in it. So there is both seem to be there. There is a law that is operating, and yet there is also a freedom that is operating. Okay. So consciousness and force. And you go back to the source of things, you see that it is Satchidananda. There is Chit and there is Shakti both. And they are one at the highest level. Okay. So it is so satisfying to read Sri Aurobindo's explanations because it answers to all the problems that one can have. I was watching that video the other day of 4 people. I'll try and send you the link if you want. You can watch. It's about 45 minutes. There is a Sadhguru is there. There are scientists there. There is a man from Ramakrishna Mission. None of them are able to give all proper answers. It is Sri Aurobindo who gives absolutely pakka answers. Of course, they will say, what is the guarantee that what you are saying is true? So that they will say. But doesn't matter. It is very, very satisfying to the intellect, what he is saying. So, an energy is unintelligible. We can't understand how can these two opposite things be there together. Okay, freedom and law, both. Yet, an opposite aspect of the nature of the cosmic phenomenon as we see it appears to forbid the theory of a random action generating a persistent order. How can chaos produce order? It's not possible. Okay? So we see that there is a problem. There is too much of an iron insistence on order. Very simple. As I said just now, cats only produce cats, dogs only produce dogs. There's too much of an iron insistence on order. There's no chaos. Okay? On a law basing the possibilities. Okay? One would be justified rather in supposing that there is an inherent imperative truth of things unseen by us, but a truth capable of manifold manifestation. So, we have to come to the conclusion that there is something which is capable of both these things, and that's the truth. Okay, and it's a truth which is capable of infinite variation. So the one can become the many. We come to that, but a truth capable of manifold manifestation, throwing out a multitude of possibilities and variants of itself, which the creative energy by its action turns into so many realized actualities. Okay, so there seems to be a consciousness and there seems to be also order without chaos. And the creation is being helped by the Shakti, and there is a consciousness which is guiding the Shakti and making sure that everything is in order. Okay, so that's what is it. Realized actuality. This brings us to a second explanation. A mechanical necessity in things. So this is the other explanation which science is giving. Okay, a mechanical necessity in things. Its workings recognizably by us as so many mechanical laws of nature. The necessity, we might say, of some such secret inherent truth of things, as we have supposed, governing automatically the processes we observe in action in the universe. This is very clear. Science is saying everything is mechanical law and there is order. Okay, there is the element of chance is there, but there is order. Okay, to such an extent, as I keep saying, okay, we can even forecast the eclipse. 100 years from today, a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse, and even whether it's going to be partial or whether it's going to be total or whether it's going to be annular, there's also an annular eclipse, the three types of eclipses. One is partial, one is full. The moon covers the sun fully, or the moon doesn't cover the sun fully, it covers only the center, so there's a ring around it. That's called the annular eclipse. Okay, so that you can forecast, you can say exactly what is going to happen, which means that there is order. There is no, there is a law that operates. Okay, so now Swami is saying, but a theory of mechanical necessity by itself does not elucidate the free play of the endless unaccountable variations which are visible in the evolution. Yes, there is order, but how does order allow freedom to come in? Mechanical law, how does it allow a freedom? They seem to be opposites. Okay, there must be a, where is it gone? But a theory of mechanical necessity, that means order and law, mechanical necessity, law, by itself does not elucidate the free play of the endless unaccountable variations. So many different types of things are coming out, so which are visible in the evolution. There must be behind the necessity or in it, okay, a law of unity associated with a coexistent but dependent law of multiplicity. Both the things seem to be there. The multiplicity implies freedom, and the unity implies fixity. No? One will produce only one, but multiplicity, it is producing many. So again, this basic idea of freedom and law and consciousness and force, these are all linked. Actually, it's very simple. But when you look at different ways of looking at things, it comes back always to the same thing. Chit and Shakti. Always it goes back. So when you understand this Chit and Shakti fully, many things get explained. Even the law of karma gets explained. Okay. So keep that in mind. Pretty clear? So there must be behind the necessity or in it. See how accurate Srindu is. Something from behind or in it. Okay. A law of unity associated with a coexistent but dependent law of multiplicity. Okay, so he's saying that consciousness is the main thing, but consciousness allows law to dominate also. Law also is there in it. In fact, law is a part of consciousness. Freedom allows also the law to operate. So he's saying there can be two things, that the spiritual people will tell you consciousness is the main and it allows law to operate. The scientists will say, the materialists will say, no, it is law that is operating, but it is allowing a little variation. So there are two different ways of looking at it. Which is right? That's what someone is asking. Both are right in one way. Okay, both are right. If you are looking from above, consciousness is the main. If you are looking from below, law seems to be the main. Okay, so that's why both have got reason. Then, in a law of where is it gone? Free play of the endless unaccountable variations which are visible in the evolution. There must be behind the necessity or in it a law of unity associated with a coexistent but dependent law. Note the word dependent, it's not independent. The law is subject to the consciousness. Dependent law of multiplicity, both insisting on manifestation. Both seem to be there, operating at the same time in evolution. But the unity of what? The multiplicity of what? Okay. Mechanical necessity can give no answer. Can spirituality give an answer? Yes. The origin is the Sat, the substance which is absolutely featureless and infinite and subtlest. But it contains everything in it. Okay. That is the answer. But that's an answer which very rational people will not accept. But if you have got faith and you feel that yes, it satisfies me, then you will accept. Okay. So the unity of what? Multiplicity of what? Okay. So we know very well what it is. Okay, really? It's like the potter who is making pots of different sizes and different shapes and different colors. So somebody comes and says, "Oh, you are making so many different pots and so many different colors and shapes. What is the material from which you are doing all this?" He will tell you, it is clay. Okay, it's a featureless clay. So this is the spiritual answer. The whole universe is nothing but all these different pots and pans and different forms, and the origin of all this is the Sat, existence, a subtle substance which contains consciousness in it and contains also force. This is the origin of everything. It can satisfy if you go on with faith, and your faith will be justified. But if you are a rationalist, you will say, no, this explanation is a hypothesis. How can I accept? But spiritual experience is not hypothesis at all. It's actual experience. I remember one person who had come to the ashram. He was a professor of philosophy, and he told Jugalda. Jugalda was our in charge of the knowledge. Okay, he was a very, very intelligent man. He was the director of the knowledge aspect, the higher course. So they were having a discussion, and he said, "I've got so many problems." That professor of philosophy, he said, "My mind is going on throwing up so many problems, and I don't understand so many things." So Jugalda told him, "Read the Life Divine. You'll get all your answers there." And he answered, "Oh, but that is all only a story. It's only a hypothesis. What is the guarantee?" So a scientist who agrees that there are levels of consciousness above the mind can accept this. But a scientist who says that the mind is the ultimate reality and there is nothing beyond that, he will never be able to accept all these things. That's the whole problem. There are levels of consciousness. But one way we can answer, I don't know if they will be satisfied, but one way you can answer these people who doubt there are levels of consciousness above the mind is this, that if you look below, you will see that there are levels of consciousness. So why should there not be levels of consciousness above the mind? If you look below, you will see that a cat has got less intelligence than man, and a worm has got even less intelligence than a cat. Okay, and in stone there is no consciousness at all. So there is a grade. So why should not there be grade also above the mind? Oh, that they will say that doesn't. You are going too far away. It's not logical and it's not rational. So this is the problem. If you accept that, then everything is okay. So now certainly is saying, again, the emergence of consciousness out of the inconscient is a stumbling block in the way of this theory. Okay? That means the scientist, he will never be able to explain how consciousness is coming out of matter. He will take it as a hypothesis. Oh, matter has got the capacity to produce life, and also it is producing consciousness. It is also producing mental consciousness. But how? He will not answer. He will say that is the nature of matter. Okay. So I'm reading the sentence again. Again, the emergence of consciousness out of the inconscient is a stumbling block in the way of this theory. Which theory? The materialistic theory, which says that only law operates. For it's a phenomenon which can have no place in an all-pervading truth of inconscient mechanical necessity. It is impossible to explain consciousness as an independent principle if you are a materialist. They will tell you that consciousness is not an independent principle. It is a dependent principle on matter. That's what they will tell you. But now slowly we are seeing that that is not true anymore, because the number of cases which are being reported near to the experience. Your consciousness is going out of the body. It doesn't depend upon the body. It doesn't depend upon matter. And yet you are fully conscious. And there are so many experiences that you have. You can meet your the interesting movies also are made on all these things, because based on facts actually. Okay, they remember their past lives. They meet their children who are dead. I'm referring specifically to some movies. Okay, so there's a man who was a materialist, pakka materialist. He had an accident, car accident, and he shot out of his body, and he met his son who had died when he was 9 years old. And then he turned around and he stopped his materialistic ideas altogether. There's another, I have all these movies with me. If anyone is interested, I can send them to you. Okay. There is one movie in which a small child, okay, a young girl, is incurable. Scientists are saying that she has absolutely, it's impossible to cure her. But one day she climbs a tree and she falls down from the tree and she has an experience. Okay. She says, God came to me and told me that you will become all right, and she became absolutely all right after that. It's a very interesting movie also. So experience will convince you that there is something beyond mere matter. Okay. But that is the thing. If scientists have experience, that's what happened to Fritjof Capra. No? Fritjof Capra was a scientist, a Pakka scientist, sitting on the California coast. And he had the experience of this creation. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. The universe is being created every instant and it is being destroyed at every instant. And he has written that book, The Tao of Physics. Okay? The Tao is the equivalent concept of Brahman in China. And he wrote that, The Tao of Physics. Okay, so this is what Siddhartha is saying. You have to see that both things are there. There is freedom as well as there is law in the world. Okay, so I go to the next sentence. If there is a necessity which compels the emergence, it can only be this, that there is already a consciousness concealed in the inconscient, waiting for evolution, and when all is ready, breaking out from its prison of apparent nations. In other words, science will take a very big step when they accept the idea of involution. They are talking very glibly of evolution. They are talking very easily, oh, there is evolution. But even that evolution, there are so many different theories. Okay, some say there's a purpose, some say there's no purpose, so all that. But if you take the idea of involution, then things become much more. But science has not yet come to involution. They have not come yet. Waiting for evolution, and when all is ready, breaking out from its place of apparent nation. Apparent nations. The nations in matter is not really total lack of consciousness. There is a consciousness hiding. We may indeed get rid of the difficulty of the imperative order of things by supposing that it does not exist. Okay. That determinism in nature is imposed on it by our thought, which needs such an imperative order to enable it to deal with its surroundings. But in reality, there is no such thing. This is what the materialist will answer. He will say, what is the materialist going to say? That there is imperative order is not there. It is really only chance. Okay. You are seeing with your mind, you are saying that there is order, but there is no order really. There is only a chance. Okay, that's what you can say, that is a hypothesis. But in reality, there is no such thing. There is no such thing as consciousness. It's only a result of matter, of force. There is only a force. There is not Sremla saying, he is telling you about the materialistic theory. There is only a force experimenting in a random action of infinitesimals which build up there in the general results different determinations by a repetitive persistence operating in the sum of their action. This is the explanation that normally they give. Mutation of cells. That is the nature of matter and is going on. And when the mutation occurs, new plants are produced, new animals are produced, new conditions are produced. That's what they will tell you. Okay. There is a force. Force is an F cap. Okay. What is force? They will not be able to explain. But there is a force. Experimenting in a random action. This is a scientific theory, the materialistic theory. A force is there. We can see the force. Experimenting in a random action of infinitesimals. Infinitesimals, he means at the cellular level, which build up in their general results different determinations by a repetitive persistence operative in the sum of their action. There is a repetitive process, and in that repetitive process, slight variations come into the infinitesimals. So there is a mutation of cells by a repetitive process. Thus, we go back from necessity to chance as the basis of our existence. Whichever way you go, you have to assume that the other one also exists. But what then is this mind, this consciousness, which differs so radically from the energy that produced it for its action It has to impose its idea and need of order on the world she has made and in which it is obliged to live. Okay? After all, even the scientist is saying that consciousness is coming out of matter. So, what is this? How to explain? Okay? There would then be the double contradiction of consciousness emerging from a fundamental inconscience and of a mind of order and reason manifesting as a brilliant final consequence of a world created by inconscient chance. Okay? Then you would have to come to this double contradiction. That's why science is puzzled. It does not know what the answers are. Okay? There is consciousness coming out of fundamental inconscience. These things may be possible, but they need a better explanation than any yet given before we can afford to them any acceptance. The scientific explanation, fine, you accept it as a hypothesis, but surely there is a better explanation. A hypothesis is not an explanation. It's an acceptance of certain fundamental things which you think you can start from. There is a big difference between a hypothesis and the ultimate truth of things. So this is what Shraddha is saying. Okay? Big para, but to summarize, I'll just tell you what he's saying. We'll read the summary to get the whole idea in a condensed manner. Science indeed sees the process of things and utilizes them, but without understanding the essential reality. It sees that there is a free variation, a seeming chance, a random production of innumerable forms. But again, it sees a fixity, a law operating everywhere. Chance and law both jostling together. Okay? Even more surprising is the emergence of consciousness from the inconscient. How is matter producing life and how is life producing mind? Could consciousness be inherent in the so-called inconscient? This is what he's suggesting. Could it be like that? So we have to suppose that. So then we have to explain how this impossible situation arises. How can unconsciousness produce consciousness? So we have, it's 22, so we have got 15 minutes. So we can read the next one. This opens the way for other explanations which make consciousness the creator of the world. So we have been thinking that we see order in the physical world and we think that order is the ultimate principle. But we see also chance, consciousness. So now why not try the other argument that consciousness is the ultimate and it is producing order. So why not go that way? That's what he's going to discuss in the next paragraph. This opens the way for another explanation, for other explanations. So who will read that? One of you can read it. You have to decide quickly who will read. Yes, ma'am. Will you read? Yeah. Go ahead. It's a 1.5 page para. Let's read it. Yeah, who is going to read?
Yasmin, are you reading?
She has muted herself. Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, Yasmin, read the para.
Oh, you want me to read? Fine.
Yes, why not?
Just a moment, just a moment.
Okay.
This opens the way for other explanations which makes consciousness the creator of this world out of an apparent original inconscient. A mind, a will, seems to have imagined and organized the universe, but it has veiled itself behind its creation. Its first erection has been the screen of an inconscient energy and a material form of substance, at once a disguise of its presence and a plastic creative basis on which it could work as an artisan uses for his production of forms and patterns a dumb and obedient material. All these things we see around us are then the thoughts of an extra cosmic divinity. A being with an omnipotent and omniscient mind and will, who is responsible for the mathematical law of the physical universe, for its artistry of beauty, for its strange play of sameness and variations, of concordance and discords, of combining and intermingling opposites, for the drama of consciousness struggling to exist and seeking to affirm itself in an inconscient universal order. The fact that this divinity is invisible to us, undiscoverable by our mind and senses, offers no difficulty, since self-evidence, a direct sign of an extra cosmic creator, could not be expected in a cosmos which is void of his presence. The patent signals everywhere of the works of an intelligence, of law, design, formula, adaptation of means to end, constant and inexhaustible inventions. Fantasy, even but restrained by an ordering reason, might be considered sufficient proof of this origin of things, or if this creator is not entirely supracosmic, but is also immanent in his works, even then there need be no other sign of him, except indeed to some consciousness evolving in this inconscient world, but only when its evolution reached a point it could become aware of the indwelling presence. The intervention of this evolving consciousness would not be a difficulty, since there would be no contradiction to the basic nature of things in its appearance. An omnipotent mind could easily infuse something of itself into its creatures. One difficulty remains. It is the arbitrary nature of the creation, the incomprehensibility of its purpose, the crude meaninglessness of its law of unnecessary ignorance, strife, and suffering, its ending without a denouncement or issue, a play. But why this stamp of so many undivine elements and characters in the play of one whose nature must be supposed to be divine? To the suggestion that what we see worked out in the world is the thoughts of God, the retort can be made that God could well have had better thoughts, and the best thought of all would have been to refrain from the creation of an unhappy and unintelligible universe. All theistic explanations of existence, starting from an extra cosmic deity, stumble over this difficulty and can only evade it. It would disappear only if the creator were, even though exceeding the creation, yet immanent in it, himself in some sort, both the player and the play, and infinite casting infinite possibilities into the set form of an evolutionary cosmic order.
Yeah, it's a big para, and there are very, very interesting things in it. So the previous para that we read, he's saying that you could say there can be a hypothesis that law is the primary truth of things. That's a materialistic view. But they have to admit that consciousness is coming out of unconsciousness, and they can't explain that. Okay, it's a problem for them. Now, Srendra is saying, if it's a problem, why not I try another hypothesis? I start with the idea that consciousness is the main thing and law is a subsequent thing. So let me try that. So he's saying, suppose we go in that way, this is what he's discussing in this para. So if the consciousness is the creator of the universe, with law as a subsequent result of its own consciousness, then can it stand explanation? That's what he's looking at. And then he says, but if consciousness is the creator of the world, there is one big problem. Why is this consciousness, which has got a choice and it is master of what it's creating, how does it create suffering in the world? Okay, so he's saying all the theistic explanations, all those who think that God is the ultimate, like a king sitting on top, they can never explain suffering if you think that only God is the explanation that there is a God who is creating the world. Remember that this God can also be impersonal. Then that will explain everything. But theistic explanations don't have that. Ultimately, there is only a God. Okay, so that's what he's saying now. So, like last time, we have got 5 minutes. So I'll quickly read out the summary of what he's saying. Then we'll go into details next time. Because remember, this is not Sri Aurobindo's own idea. He's saying that we could start from the opposite hypothesis. Okay, and the hypothesis we are saying is consciousness is the real. Because when you start with the idea that law is the ultimate truth of things from matter, you have a problem. So why not try another explanation? That's what he's saying. And the other explanation is we will start with consciousness as the ultimate reality. So what he's saying here, I'm reading out to you the summary. An explanation can there be that there is another explanation. There can be that there is an extra cosmic conscious mind that is creating the universe. Let us start with this. Don't argue with me, but let us see where it will lead us. This theory that there is an extra cosmic consciousness. Okay, an extra cosmic outside the cosmos. He is producing the cosmos, but he's not in the cosmos. Okay, this is important because if he's in the cosmos, there are different consequences. He is outside the cosmos, creating the cosmos. Mind is that creating, is mind that is a extra cosmic conscious mind that is creating the universe. Okay, he's not talking of God. He's talking of just a principle of mind creating the universe. Not seeing the creator is not a problem, as one would see a painting, but no painter in an exhibition hall. Okay, the painting is real. The physical world is real. Okay, so I have to assume I don't see the painter, but surely somebody has painted these things. So somebody has surely created all these things. This is the whole problem. The materialist doesn't go to this point at all. Okay. So they will argue and say, why should there be a creator? It has come by itself. Okay. So since they're saying even if you don't see the creator, it's not a problem because as you say, you go into an exhibition hall, you see the painting, but you don't see the painter. Or even if the creator were in the cosmos, okay, if he's in the cosmos, you should be able to see him. But even if he is a creator in the cosmos, he could hide himself behind the creations. So in any case, whether he is outside the cosmos or in the cosmos, you don't see him unless you are very much like your consciousness rises to that level. So Sri Aurobindo is saying here, even if he is in the cosmos, even if the creator were in the cosmos, he could hide himself behind his creations, much like the director of a film. Okay, the film has got a very fine story and it's a well-developed story, but who has written it and who is directing the whole thing? You don't see the director of a film when you are seeing a film at all. So it's very similar to that. That's what Sri Aurobindo is saying. So he's discussing the theory. He could hide himself behind several veils. Why only one veil? The first of which could be matter, a material which hides the creator, yet is plastic enough to be molded into any shape. The second veil could be life, and the third could be mind. But why create at all? Why should he create at all? Why does he not keep quiet? Okay, for the joy of creation. Asking a question. Then he says, then if it is for the joy of creation, then why the pain and the suffering? This problem is insoluble if the creator is personal and extra cosmic. But if he is impersonal and not extra cosmic but in the cosmos, then the problem changes. This is what he has discussed in the delight of existence, the problem, and delight of existence, the solution. It is not God who is sitting out there and imposing suffering on others. No, he is not doing that. He is himself experiencing the suffering. So that's a different problem altogether. It's a problem still. Why should someone put suffering on himself? Okay, that's another explanation. So this is what he's saying in the para. Okay, we'll discuss it next time in detail because we should see the argument. But be very clear. He is discussing the theories and the philosophies. Okay, one by one. So next time we'll go through this one. Next time is tomorrow itself, na?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So we'll do this tomorrow. This opens the way for other creations. Okay. So I'll just make a note on chat. Okay. This redo page 316.